And now, your go-to source for year-round fantasy hockey advice, DFS, and betting coverage. This is NHL Fantasy on Ice, presented by Skip, the official food delivery app of the NHL.
We're halfway there, down to 4 teams remaining in the Stanley Cup playoffs, brought to you by our good friends over at Skip. This is NHL Fantasy on Ice. On today's edition of the podcast, we set focus on a conference finals preview. Nick Alberga and Jake Hahn with you down to Florida, Carolina, Edmonton, and Dallas. Jake, now gets fun, buddy.
Like producer Bobby says, we're halfway there and we're living on a prayer, Nick, with 4 teams praying that they hoist Lord Stanley in about a month's time. And this episode is brought to you by Skip. Skip to the good part and get groceries, meals, and essentials delivered right to your door on Skip.
Eastern Conference Final gets underway on Tuesday night in Raleigh. Then on Wednesday night, Dallas and Edmonton. Front and center, we got Michael Leboff coming on to talk some betting points and things to look at in this series. But does it feel to you, Jake, like we're on a collision course for a rematch of last year's Stanley Cup Final?
It really does. This is the point where I'm starting. Well, maybe there was a point in the second round where I was starting to really believe it when Florida got back in that series against Toronto, and obviously Edmonton was looking really good against Vegas, and thinking, man, are we just going to see these two teams duke it out again? And the narrative be, can Florida go back to back? Can Edmonton get revenge? Can Connor McDavid finally get that first Stanley Cup? So I'd be here for the rematch, Nick. Obviously, there's a lot of other good combinations that I think would be interesting. The Rantanen Bowl is something I know Pete Jensen wants the Rantanen Bowl. We've talked to him a lot. That's the storyline he wants, and I certainly wouldn't mind watching that play out, but you got to love how the Panthers are playing and the Oilers are playing right now, Nick. It's hard to pick against those teams.
I like the Rantanen look. You can't forget, like, Edmonton was sniffing around, depending on who you talk to, around the trade deadline for Mikko Rantanen. I don't know how that fits cap-wise, but certainly a conversation there, too.
I'm going to steal a line from Jason Demers. There's levels to this league, and I really believe the Panthers and Oilers have hit that Stanley Cup winning level. The other 2 teams I have not seen, of course, we don't know. I think Dallas can get there. I'm with you. It feels like a collision course, but this Edmonton Oilers goaltending is really, really tough to back. I mean, we're taking Pickard and we're taking Stuart Skinner. That's a big problem when you're facing off against Ottinger here.
And I think that's what's giving me the toughest time in this series, because everything else I look at, especially the depth that we're seeing from Edmonton right now, is sort of coming together. You could even argue better than their Stanley Cup final run last year, but Bob brings it up. I mean, the goaltending, I know Skinner ended that last round quite well, but I think a lot of that had more to do with the team in front of him playing well defensively. Dallas is going to be a different issue for them, and Ottinger is just playing as good as any goaltender in the league right now. So you go up and down that Dallas lineup, they're fully healthy now. They got a goaltender playing as good as anybody left, and they have home ice advantage as well, Nick. I don't. How much is that factoring in? Because we're seeing a lot of teams that don't have home ice advantage, road teams, actually priced as the favorite the last couple of rounds, something we're not really used to seeing.
It doesn't mean anything, honestly, and I think maybe the one team it does mean a lot to is the Carolina Hurricanes, who are 5-0 at home in these Stanley Cup playoffs, and we'll get to that series. But I think you're right. I think the goaltending is everything to the Edmonton-Dallas series. Ottinger 8-5-0, 2.47, 919. My rebuttal to you guys would be that Adin Hill, I think he was the 17th string netminder on the Vegas Golden Knights a couple years ago, won a Stanley Cup. So I think if Stuart Skinner can play more like the guy, clearly, who finished off the last series against Vegas, I think it puts them on a runway to win this Stanley Cup. Like, I think if you look at this series and the run so far for Edmonton, McDavid and Draisaitl have been good, but have they been amazing? They haven't hit that level, that Stanley Cup level that Bob just talked about. When they do, Jake, it's going to be troublesome for the rest of the league, namely the Dallas Stars here.
It's crazy, too. Remember a couple years ago when the Oilers were so heavy on their power play, so reliant on their power play? I remember that series that they lost a few years back to Vegas where they were dominated at even strength. This year, they dominated Vegas at even strength and made quick work. 14-7, the Oilers outscored the Golden Knights, that structured team, at 5-on-5 in the series. That's pretty nuts.
I think the one thing I like most about this conference final, guys, and the 4 teams, no frauds this year. There's always a fraud. At least for me, there's usually a fraud that I can't wait to pick against. I'm like, this team has no business being in the conference finals. I can't say that about any of these 4 teams. I mean, Dallas absolutely should be here. We know about Edmonton and Florida. They were here last year. They're just proving it over again. Now, Carolina is the one, Nick, I look at and I go, okay, yeah, they've ran through their competition. They've played 10 games, 5 games first round, 5 games second round. They've lost 1 game in regulation. the entire run. So we can't call them frauds, but I would say they haven't been tested like maybe some of these other teams just based on their path to get there. And so they're the one I'm questioning the most. Not to say that they can't prove that they can beat the Florida Panthers, but I think Carolina is the one that a lot of us are still questioning right now.
How dare you besmirch the good name of Denmark and Pete Jensen and Freddie Anderson, the role this guy's on, Jake. 7-1-1, 1.36, 937, one shutout, but I think you're totally right. I think you're totally right. Taking nothing away from the first two opponents of the Canes.
And he already got his injury out of the way. So that's
and his new contract.
We know that's on the Frederik Andersen bingo card at some point in a playoff run. So you hope he's just fully healthy the rest of the way. I'm excited to see them get tested. None of us know exactly how these games in these series are going to play out, but we've watched Carolina. They've been very impressive through 2 rounds. The Florida Panthers are a completely different animal. And if you look at how the Eastern Conference has gone the last 5 to 6 years, it's been dominated by the Atlantic Division. We just have not been able to see Metro Division teams break through. Florida's on their run right now. It was Tampa before that, maybe Boston briefly before that as well. Eastern Conference, like I said, dominated by the Atlantic, and we'll see if a Metro team can finally break up that run.
Guys, remember a couple years ago when these teams met up in the Eastern Conference Final and Carolina got swept? All 4 games were 1-goal games. Important wrinkle here. Maybe their best skater this postseason, Svechnikov, he was out for that whole series. So if he's here scoring that extra goal or two, I think Carolina's close enough where they could tip the scale a little bit. Also, they need contributions from those couple of trade deadline acquisitions, Stankoven and Taylor Hall. But they have some new wrinkles compared to a couple years ago.
No offense. I hate the whole couple years ago thing and looking back at that series and what it means. I mean, Seth Jones is on the ice. Brad Marchand is on the ice. I mean, there's just
That's
different
fair.
players. I mean, I get it with Carolina. They didn't have Svechnikov. Here's the thing. Canes have played a lot less games. Did the Toronto series wear out Florida a little bit? I don't think so. I think Florida, I just think there's more to this run. That's why I liked them against Toronto. It just didn't feel like their run is done. When Tampa was going through the run, you kind of felt like it's done for them. I think Florida's got another couple rounds to win here. Their run isn't done.
And you can't forget, too, you don't want to compare it to previous years, but the Panthers team last year, the one prior, this team's really damn good, too, Jake. Brad Marchand's been an excellent pickup. The thing with the Florida Panthers that they don't get enough credit for, they find guys who fit their roster. And even Seth Jones, I thought he was awesome in Game 7, and he's a bona fide stud defenseman, number 1, at worst number 2, and I think he proved it in Game 7. You add him to the mix, and that's why I think the Panthers are a perennial contender, clearly, and could win this thing. But even a guy like E2 Luosterainen on the third line, they're going, Jake. And this has happened the last couple years where by the game they get stronger and stronger and stronger. And now you factor in Sergei Bobrovsky starting to cook a bit, and I think, again, Carolina could be in trouble here.
Well, we know we can rely on Bob. He might have his moments that he did in the Maple Leaf series as well, right? Where you thought, ooh, that one went in on him, but he's able to bounce back, and they have so many other things that they do well that they could get by with a bad goaltending performance, maybe even a couple bad goaltending performances from Bobrovsky in the conference finals and still feel like they could find ways to win games. And Bob referenced it. I think one thing people might be looking for to pick against the Panthers is this team worn out. Back-to-back Cup final appearances, winning it last year, 7-game series against the Maple Leafs. We all watched that Game 7 on Sunday night, Nick. They don't look like a team that's worn out to me. They look like a team, and I get a quick turnaround conference final. That can be a little bit difficult, but they look like they got a lot left in that tank, and they just know how to win these high-pressure situations.
That's what everyone's talking about, the quick turnaround, Game 1, the schedule makers. Nico Torchia, my man Nico Torchia, did they screw over Florida? I love Florida Game 1. I'm going against conventional wisdom. Hurricanes have been sitting back. Florida intensity plus money. I'm taking the Panthers. I know we're early talking about this. We'll get to it with Leboff, but I love the Panthers tonight, Game 1.
Bobby, that's a great point because, Jake, I wanted to ask you about rest versus rust. Always a great conversation, always great from the Carolina aspect. You're playing awesome. You've played 10 games. Even Edmonton, where do you sit in the rest versus rust conversation here?
Honestly, I don't like to read too much into it because I think you kind of put yourself in a bit of a pretzel, and you can find pros and cons about both sides. I mean, who doesn't want the rest and a little bit of time off? off and, okay, heal the body up and the bumps and bruises. We always talk about that come playoff time. But I do think rust exists. And kind of what Bob says, like you just ride that wave from a Game 7 win, a perfect game from the Florida Panthers. You're feeling good. You just eliminated a good hockey team, and then you just ride that right into Game 1. So I usually prefer that, Nick. But at the end of the day, I'm just going to pick the team that I trust more, the team that I like in more areas, and I just think can succeed in those high pressure situations. So I'm going with the Florida Panthers here in this series. At this point, I just can't pick against this team. And no matter the situation, you blow a 3-0 lead in the Stanley Cup final, they go out and win Game 7. They have moments in that Leaf series where they don't look good. They got to play a Game 7. They look totally comfortable playing that game. It looked like just a Tuesday night regular season game to the Panthers.
Guys, when we get this deep down the line and you see these teams so stacked up well against each other, a lot of the times I think it comes down to the third liners. Florida, you can make the case to this point, has the best third line with Marchand, Luosterainen, and Lundell. In the second round, I saw that Luosterainen and Marchand were tied for the even strength points lead in the entire second round across the 4 series. So that's really significant. But I still lean on that Dallas, bottom 6. I feel like Dallas has the best bottom 6 forward group. What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, you can make a case for both those. I think as somebody who watched Florida quite a bit here in round 2, that line was the difference. And Luosterainen has been a massive story. I think he's got 10 points on the road in these Stanley Cup playoffs. Like, again, every team has their quirks, but certainly when you look at the Panthers, Jake, like that's always my major takeaway is like the top 6 were held in check. Barkov didn't do much. Matthew Tkachuk's banged up. Like, he is a shell of himself right now, and that's going to be an evolving story as we continue on here. But the third line just ate the Maple Leafs for lunch. So, Pete, I'd probably answer it in that facet, taking nothing away from Dallas. Jake, it has to be the third line of the Panthers for me.
I'm glad you brought up Tkachuk and the top players, Nick, because look, all these teams have excellent forward depth at this point. We're talking the 4 best teams in the NHL. They all deserve to be here. They're all deep. They all have great third lines. You could say even in some cases a solid fourth line as well. I'm curious what we see from the top players in Florida because they actually didn't have that great of a series at all against the Maple Leafs, and they still found a way to win, which tells you how impressive that Panthers roster is. But can we get something a little bit more out of them? Because I think against Carolina, you're probably going to need it. And on the Canes side, I always say this about the Canes every year. At some point, whether it's the second round or the conference final, the offense just tends to dry up and that finishing ability goes away. Svechnikov had an awesome series against the Washington Capitals and he kind of stepped up and became that guy that we've always wanted him to be. Can he continue to do that? Is there anybody else in this Canes roster we can look at to step up and actually put the puck in the back of the net? Because we know they can generate, we know they shoot from everywhere, but that finishing ability, it tends to dry up from time to time, and I'd be worried about that in a series against a good team like the Panthers.
I'm worried about entertainment as well. I think patience is going to be a virtue. I know the Canes are getting a bad rap, but last time I checked, they're in a conference final yet again, and it doesn't matter about the products, about getting the job done, but I think that's probably the key to playing the Florida Panthers is just executing and capitalizing on mistakes, and maybe that's a series you look at and say, hey, just hammer the under every game, Jake.
You're probably right about the under, but I'm in this camp that I do not find the Carolina Hurricanes boring. I don't know where all this has come from. I look, I get it. Are they the most exciting team left? No, they're probably the least exciting team left. But I still find their games exciting. I still think they play at a high pace, and it's a little bit of a different style, but it still works for me. And like you said, it's effective, and they're winning hockey games. I don't think their fan base cares. Just the fact that they're here at this point. All that being said, though, I am more excited, I got to say, for the Western Conference Final, Nick. Edmonton and Dallas, anytime Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl are on the ice and this team's playing at the level that it is, and it almost feels impossible to pick against Dallas at this point as well with how well they're playing, and they've had to face some adversity in some high-pressure situations. So I would say I'm more excited for the Western Conference Final here.
Again, with that West Final, for me, it's all about the goaltending. I don't know if Jake Ottinger is getting enough praise because Mikko Rantanen's been out of this world here in the Stanley Cup playoffs, but I feel like we're having a moment where Jake Ottinger is ascending into top 5 stardom in terms of goalies in this league, where he's the consistent fixture there, where in recent seasons, I think he's had ups, he's had downs, but never been that consistent guy. But I think he's getting stronger and stronger as well, and we'll get to Michael Leboff coming up about Conn Smythe contenders. It's probably going to be Rantanen if Dallas wins, but I would not sleep on Jake Ottinger. And for me, I think you look at Edmonton, I think they have another level to get to. We talk about depth too, Jake. That's the big reason why I picked Edmonton to win the Stanley Cup to begin the year. Before the playoffs, those guys are really elevating right now. Like, you're getting goals from Connor Brown and Adam Henrique and Evander Kane. Like, when you add that to the original cast with McDavid and Draisaitl and Hyman and Nugent Hopkins and all those guys, like, you are just very, very difficult to play against. And Miro Heiskanen coming back, he's going to have a bigger role, you would think, in this series. And on the periphery, I think the big story nobody really talks about, they're doing this all, Edmonton is, without Matthias Ekholm, and it sounds like he's getting closer to returning here.
That would be a huge boost to a blue line that's playing really well right now. I was very impressed by how they closed out that series against Vegas and insulated Stuart Skinner. Right now, Skinner still had to make a couple saves here and there, which he did, and it was kind of nice to see him find his game because he is an easy guy to root for. So we'll see. Obviously, Dallas is going to be a different test for him. I don't know how much I'm reading in to those last couple games, but you got to love how the blue line's playing. You mentioned Ekholm coming back, and credit to you for believing in this Oilers team, Nick. I didn't see it at all. What I saw was Connor McDavid, not really looking 100%. Even question marks about maybe Draisaitl's health as well, and a team that I didn't really believe in the depth. I thought the moves that they made in the offseason cost them, going out and prioritizing Arvidsson and Skinner and then losing those RFAs to St. Louis, and we kind of just saw it all season. So I didn't have much belief in this roster, but they're peaking at the right time, and they found it in that LA series, and they really have never looked back. They dominated a really good Vegas team. So at this point, it's just turn in the card, pick Connor McDavid, pick Leon Draisaitl. If you get beat, you get beat. But they kind of got that look in their eyes right now that we've made it this far. We made it far last year. We're not going to let that happen again. We are not going to have another offseason of disappointment in Edmonton.
It is a similar look to producer Bob when he sees a pastrami sandwich, man. Just fired up, ready to go.
Bad news for the pastrami sandwich.
Yeah, it always is. But any objections with the series prices? We see the Panthers right now as a minus 130 favorite against Carolina, Edmonton minus 120 against Dallas.
No objections, because I think Florida, I get it. We're favoring the road teams. We did it all second round. All 4 road teams were favored in most places in the second round. And look, the odds makers ended up looking pretty smart. They all came through. So I got to roll with it again. And I just think Florida at this point, I don't care if it's home, road, if we're playing on the moon, the Florida Panthers deserve to start as the favorite. I think they just have to at this point. You could even maybe argue a bigger favorite than they are in some spots right now. And Edmonton, Dallas, Nick, I can't figure it out at all, so just slap minus 110 on both sides, and we'll figure it out as the series goes on. We'll have lots of ups and downs, I think, throughout the course of that series, but I think it's as tight as it gets, so no argument with the pricing here.
Tell you what, that'd be a very tough game on the moon. Want to get in the action for Stanley Cup playoffs at Bet365? They got you from game props, player props, totals on the money line. You can even bet on futures like series winners, conference champions, and Stanley Cup champions, and much, much more. Whatever your bet is, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Download the app and get in the game. An official partner of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Must be 19 or older. Ontario only. Please play responsibly. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, visit ConnexOntario.ca. All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty of the betting here in the conference finals as we're joined once again by Michael Leboff. Leboff, I just asked Jake about the series prices. Any objections?
I think they're priced correctly, I guess you would say. I don't see too much value either direction. I guess if I had to pick my favorite bet of the 4, I would go with Dallas, just because I do think that the goaltending disparity, when you're talking about 2 teams that are really close and they're being priced really close, and you're going to have to win the series on the margins, the goaltending disparity becomes a pretty big deal. It's not like, oh, this team's power play is better than this team. It's the goalie, which is very important. So I guess Dallas would be the one that I would lean to the most. And I wonder if the Oiler hype wagon is getting a little out of control. But other than that, I don't think there's all that much in the betting right now.
Leboff, Florida Carolina is fascinating to me. Kind of this ultimate test where you get this Panthers team that's just been tested over and over and over again. They're coming off of another Game 7 win, this time on the road, dominant performance against the Maple Leafs, and a Canes team that's looked excellent, has only lost 1 game in regulation, but really hasn't been tested. And you could argue, okay, maybe hasn't faced the best competition compared to the other teams. How are you looking at that series? Do you think there's maybe some value even in the Canes as an underdog with home ice advantage?
I would lean the other way. I would rather be on Florida, just because I think Carolina, they have a very, very good plan A, but when they have to go to a plan B, it's when we start to see them to struggle. And what Carolina needs for their plan A to work is they need to be able to just throw tons and tons and tons of rubber at the net. And that's all well and good. It worked against the Devils, who were completely banged up. The Capitals were awesome all season long, but they weren't like a great 5-on-5 team in terms of like possession and ozone time and preventing chances. But what the Panthers do better than any other team in the NHL, aside from Carolina, is prevent shot attempts against. Carolina finished first in the NHL in shot attempt suppression. Florida was number 2. So instead of seeing like a 60-40 split of the shot attempts like we've been accustomed to seeing with Carolina this postseason, it's going to get watered down a little bit, and then you worry about the finishing, the goaltending. Can they play with Florida in a different game? Because I think what the Panthers have shown is that they can play any style of hockey and they can do it successfully, whereas Carolina hasn't yet. So I do have some concerns there. I don't think like there's too much. You can say it's a coin flip. I wouldn't disagree too much with that. You also have the rest factor for Carolina, which is an edge for sure after that series for Florida. But I do think Florida matches up better with Carolina than any other team we've seen in this postseason so far.
How about Conn Smythe odds? You got McDavid leading the way, unsurprisingly, plus 360 over at Bet365. Rantanen plus 400, Anderson plus 500, Bobrovsky plus 800. Are you going off the page here?
Yeah, and I would put it this way, right? Like, if you're looking at Edmonton and Dallas, it's pretty clear who the winners will be. It's a very short list, right? It's Rantanen. Maybe you can make a case for Ottinger if he has a spellbinding finish to the postseason and they win. With Edmonton, it's going to be McDavid or Draisaitl. I don't think Draisaitl's a bad bet at 11-1. If McDavid's 3.5-1, why is you getting triple the price on Draisaitl, who's been there with him this entire time? Plus McDavid won last spring, and you like to see the voters like to go the other direction. The East, I think it's pretty wide open. I wouldn't expect either goaltender to just like have a smooth sail from here on out. So we can see them drop, and there's a couple of big prices out there that I like. Jacob Slavin at 66-1, I think is a good bet. But my favorite one, coming in at a whopping 500-1, is Seth Jones. He's playing nearly 26 minutes a night for the Panthers, and he got a lot of praise towards the end of that series, deservingly so, against the Maple Leafs. So another really good performance here. He's probably got to pick up his production a little bit. He's got 6 points in 12 games. That's, I think, 11th or 8th among defensemen in the postseason. But he's running that power play. So if Seth Jones has a decent series here, the Panthers come out on top. I do think you'll be pretty happy holding a 500-1 ticket.
Man, imagine that as a career turnaround, going from lost in Chicago to winning a Stanley Cup, winning a Conn Smythe with the Florida Panthers. But you're right, Lebov. He's played an integral role both ends of the ice, scores that big goal in Game 7, but it's just kind of found the right role, right? Maybe miscast in Chicago, obviously not playing on a great team. Now he comes to Florida. He's just part of a great situation there on the back end. I do like that angle, though, like attacking Florida, because no one's really stood out from the pack, and we like the Panthers. Obviously, I don't think it would shock anybody to see them win the Stanley Cup. So I think you can kind of take your pick from that group. And ultimately, there's a lot of racetrack left here, guys. A lot of recency of bias in this award. So if you finish strong, you can certainly win it. I wanted to ask you, Lebov, about how you think these games are going to go scoring-wise, just because we have seen scoring kind of plummet from round 1 into round 2. We started off hot, especially the Western Conference, so much scoring, and now it's come down. Is that just, defensive teams kind of really getting good, reading each other, or do you think we could actually open this thing back up, maybe have some high-scoring games in at least one of these series?
Yeah, and I think it's one thing that everyone always overlooks in the postseason, and there's one fan base and team that always seems to be caught surprise, and it's the Toronto Maple Leafs. Like, when you're in the playoffs, it gets harder, right? You play better teams every round. It was like the Leafs were kind of surprised that, oh, we beat the Senators. That's great. Oh, now we got to deal with the Panthers. Like, how's that fair? Well, that's how the playoffs work. You step up until the final boss. So I think what you see is that when you're playing a team in round 1 who maybe, like, 16 teams make the playoffs. So by definition, you're going to get like 6 kind of also-rans in there that aren't really elite, true contenders. And then when it gets whittled down to 4, it is the cream of the crop, and those teams are going to be really good defensively. They're going to have, in all likelihood, most of them will have a good goaltender, and they'll be well coached and well structured. So it's only going to get harder from here, and I think that's why we're going to see, especially in that Florida Panthers Carolina Hurricane series, like those totals are gonna, we'll see some 5s, and maybe if we get to 6 or 7, a juiced under 5, or the also rare 4.5 if there is a game 7.
Any props you're considering, shot props, anything like that in these series?
The Hurricanes to me are always a team that's it's interesting. They're a team I want to bet a long shot in to lead the series in goals, because they do spread the wealth. Svechnikov's been really good. Seth Jarvis has been really good. Obviously, Aho, we're kind of waiting for his breakout moment of the playoffs. So those guys are the likely heads to come out on top in these markets. But guys like Roslovic, or even like if Eric Robinson's going to continue to play, like those guys down the lineup are Martinook. Like they're interesting to me, because you're going to get huge prices on them to lead the series in goals. I mean, we just saw Brad Marchand and Eetu Luostarinen basically. I think they're tied for first with the Panthers through scoring through 2 rounds, right? So it's not, and that's a team with tons and tons of scoring. So it's one big game, 2 big games, and someone can vault to the top. So the Hurricanes are one that I would go fishing into the deep end of the pool there.
And Leboff, I know you're talking about points to lead. I mean, you're talking about goals to lead the series in goals. You could look at points as well and get some enormous numbers on Luostarinen, plus 15,000 to lead the series in points. I mean, those are 2 teams, especially Conn Smythe-wise, that you always are kind of mystified by. Like, it really depends on the series. It depends on the narrative at the end of the day. If one of those 2 teams wins it, last year Florida won it and they gave it to the other guy, right, on the other team.
Yeah. Yeah, I do wonder about that. Like, who is still in the field that can win it from a losing team? And I still think the answer is only 1, maybe 2, and it's Draisaitl and McDavid. Like, they're probably the only 2 guys. Yeah. But I agree, right? Like, by definition, Luostarinen and Marchand should be the the favorites on the Panthers. Maybe you throw Bobrovsky in there. I haven't been blown away by how Bob's played this postseason, but those 2 guys are 1-1 leading that team in points, and I think Marchand's 35-1 in the Conn Smythe market, which is a little interesting. But then Luostarinen sitting there at 250, and if he has another big series and this team wins the Stanley Cup and he does lead them in points, will he win it? Still probably not, but you'll be happy with that ticket.
I'm imagining a scenario now where the Edmonton Oilers lose again to the Florida Panthers, and Connor McDavid wins the Conn Smythe again on the losing team and wants nothing to do with it, and wins back-to-back Conn Smythe trophies. But Leboff, the ultimate question, who's winning these series, how many games, and who's hoisting the Stanley Cup when it's all said and done?
I'll say that it's going to be Panthers and Stars in the final. I think that Dallas and Edmonton has the potential to be over quickly. Those 2 teams, there's so much variance in that kind of a matchup. So I wouldn't be shocked if we see a 4 or 5 game series there. Because they're close. You can flip a coin every game, but sometimes when you flip a coin, it comes up heads 3 times in a row, right? I think Panthers and Hurricanes, both of those teams, if you told them that it was an 81 game series, it would go 80, it would go the distance. It just feels like that, right? It's going to be really hard for one of those teams to pull away. I mean, we just saw the Panthers erase a 2-0 series deficit in the last round, so they're never going to really be out of it. That one feels like I'm already kind of tired thinking about it, but I do think Florida gets out of there in 6 or 7, and Dallas, we'll call Dallas gentleman sweep in 5.
So my postseason bracket had Carolina and Edmonton, the revenge from 06, but I can't deviate from the Florida Panthers. I just think they're better than Carolina. They're going to win. So, Jake, I got Carolina, Edmonton in my cup final here. How about you?
I am finally going to come over to the dark side, join my old pal Nick Alberga, who's been on the Edmonton Oilers the entire run. I got to give you a little bit of credit for this, but hey, hopefully I don't mush you here, but I am going to jump on the Edmonton. I'm not picking against Connor and Leon at this point, and they kind of got that look in their eye. They know they're close. Again, love Dallas. I think it's going to be an excellent series. I could see it going the distance, but I'm going to go Edmonton, and I'm picking Florida. I don't think Carolina's been tested. I believe the Atlantic is supremely better than the Metro, and I think that run is going to continue. So Florida, Edmonton, once again, rematch cup final.
Love it. Petey, what do you got, bud?
I got Carolina and Dallas. I'm riding this Freddie train. Even if he regresses a little bit, I feel like Florida has gotten itself into a couple of predicaments, right? They pulled off that comeback in Game 4 against Tampa. They lost the first 2 games of the series against the Leafs. And I think that Carolina, you could see that attrition from Carolina at some point. Like maybe they just want it more because they haven't been there before. So that's why I'm picking the Canes.
Got it. Leboff, you're the man. Thank you so much for your time today.
You got it.
Want to get on the action for Stanley Cup playoffs at Bet365? They got you from game props, player props, totals, and the money line. You can even bet on futures like series winners, conference champions, the Stanley Cup champions, and much more. Whatever your bet is, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Download the app and get in the game. An official partner of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Must be 19 or older. Ontario only. Please play responsibly. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, visit ConnexOntario.ca. Jake,
Yes.
the Final Four here, buddy. Can't wait. It's been a while to get to this level. It's almost June. Feeling good about life. Let's play some hockey, buddy.
And you nailed that read under pressure. You're like a free throw shooter with the crowd making noise in the background, but he steps up and he handles the pressure perfectly. Pressure is the name of the game this time of the year, as we know, guys. Who handles it best? The teams that are here right now are handling it the best so far, but the deeper you go, the more pressure. These situations, you could see that Stanley Cup. You could visualize it. So who handles the pressure best here?
Pressure pushing down on me. A Slice of Life with Bob Bender. Of course, we're all drowning with the hockey. We love the hockey. Every night there's a game. But when the hockey is concluded and the post-game show is over, go to Netflix and check out American Manhunt. The Hunt for Osama bin Laden. Incredible, guys.
Yeah,
go watch
good.
it. Nick
It was
Nick
good.
already watched it. Audience, go watch it. Nick zipped through it in one night, right?
I did. I don't know. We're promoting Netflix now. They don't need any more publicity.
American Manhunt.
I'm going to go home. I'm already home, but I'm going to go check out NHL Unscripted, Energy Line, NHL
There you
Draft
go.
Class. I don't got time for Netflix. No, thank you. They don't pay me. So no thanks.
It's a slice of life with Bob Bender, okay? We're well-rounded people here. Again, go check it out.
Sounds good. We'll be back in about a week here. Thank you to producer Bob Bender, for Jay Kahn and Pete Jensen. I'm Nick Alberga. You've been listening to NHL Fantasy on Ice, delivered by Skip. Skip to the good part and get groceries, meals, and essentials delivered right to your door on Skip.